Hi, everyone. It's Kristan, and welcome to this new episode of the Explicitly Pro-Life podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I am very excited about today's very special guest. We have joining us Dr. Kendra Kolb. She is a practicing neonatologist in Pennsylvania. She received her medical degree from Drexel University College of Medicine, completed her residency and neonatology of medicine fellowship at St. Christopher's Hospital for Children in Philadelphia. She's certified from the American Board of Pediatrics in both pediatrics and neonatal prenatal medicine. I'm sorry, I keep adding an extra word to that. In addition, she serves as the board of directors for her local pregnancy care center in Quakertown, PA. She's been involved in the pro-life movement for a number of years. She's done work with Live Action, with Students for Life. She spoke at the 2020 National Pro-Life Summit. She's an author of a chapter of an upcoming book by Moody Publishers called Choose Life, and she's also a proud wife and mama of 3. Thank you, Kendra, for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me, Kristan. I'm a little starstruck to be talking to you. So you guys do amazing work.
Well, you're the famous one. Didn't you just do like a video with Live Action that went like all over the place? I feel like I saw you in some video.
I don't know. But again, I'm so excited to be with you guys and, be with the work you guys are doing. You guys are amazing.
Well, it's an exciting time and a very busy time for the pro-life movement. That is certainly true. And that's actually why I wanted you specifically to come on and share some of your expertise with our listeners and viewers. Because as you know, with this Dobbs v. Jackson case that's, before the Supreme Court, we're waiting for them to kind of issue their decision in June on this. But fetal pain is really at the forefront of all of this, right? And I don't know, were you able to listen to the oral arguments that came up?
Yes, I did listen to some of them.
Okay,
yes,
yeah.
Yep.
So it was, very interesting. You have a High Justice of the Court, Sotomayor, saying that life begins at conception is a religious view. I mean, it was like, how the hell did you become a Supreme Court justice and not, fail basic biology? I don't know. But, I mean, the case revolves around a Mississippi law, just for the viewers who haven't tuned into previous podcast episodes. It revolves around Mississippi law that was signed and passed and signed into law, which banned abortions at 15 weeks when children have been proven to feel pain. And these are dismember abortions because at that point they are too big to suck through the cannula or the clear plastic tube. So I guess talk to us first about this issue of maybe fetal pain a little bit and how, I mean, it's very simple. Like, you don't have to be pro-life to know that children feel pain because I know at, Cleveland Children's Hospital and other hospitals, they often give children anesthesia before procedures while they're still in the womb for, spina bifida. And so I'm like, well, they're giving those children pain medicine. So wouldn't that automatically mean that other children who are being aborted down the street have pain? So can you talk about what fetal pain is like when preborn children start experiencing it? Is it different than the pain that we as adults may feel?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Kristan, I'm so glad you brought this up. Again, I did hear, that line in particular in the oral arguments, and it makes your skin crawl. You can't, like you said, believe that a Supreme Court Justice of the United States would be that uneducated, honestly. And I think it really goes to the larger, issue of, Americans just being so ignorant on fetal development, period. We know that at 5 weeks of age, a week after mom takes that pregnancy test and finds out she's pregnant, that baby has a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. 6 weeks, the baby's face is taking shape. 8 weeks, we have distinct fingers. The baby's able to move their hand. 9 weeks, the baby has distinct toes, is moving their leg, has a startle response. And then you get to 10 weeks, and, the baby is moving their head and neck, can put their hands on their face. And that, it's just amazing. That's way, still in the first trimester, and we have a baby touching their own face. That's incredible. So 10 weeks is a special time as well. That's when the baby's not only doing reflexive movements, but it's also having some responsive movements. So if a baby is touched in any way, is through things like fetoscopy, which is an actual little camera that goes into the uterus and can look directly at the baby. So again, if the baby is, touched in any way, that can elicit responses such as squinting, eye squinting, moving the jaw, pointing the toes, and grasping with the hands. So, you have a baby who's interacting with their environment, which is, startling. It's incredible. That's a baby still in their first trimester. So then, fast forward a few weeks to, what we think is probably, early around 12 to 14 weeks. And that is when, it definitely has been established that a baby can feel pain. I found it, fascinating. One of the previous abortion proponents, the name is slipping right now, but again, who had, previously said, well, yeah, they can't feel pain until, closer to 24 weeks or whatever the prior thought was. The leading experts on fetal pain just came out and, wow, that, well, yeah, babies at, certainly 14 weeks probably can feel pain. Wow. One of the issues, that's been, a little contentious is, well, sure, the baby doesn't have a fully formed brain at that point, or cortex, kind of the big, part of the top of the brain, that, does modulate some of the, emotions of pain, the kind of higher perception of pain. But again, there's enough evidence to say that the cortex is not necessary to process pain. They have, again, demonstrated, even at 10 weeks, the baby is responding to touch. And certainly by 14 weeks, all of the structures necessary to feel pain, to react to pain with a, increase in heart rate, facial grimacing, all of the signs of distress that you or I, would do if we were in pain, the babies are doing, again, as early as 14 weeks. So like you said, they're too big at that point to go through, a suction canister. And we know the procedure that's used to end their life, is absolutely barbaric, especially in light of the fact that, again, it has been well demonstrated by experts in the field of fetal pain that these babies absolutely can feel pain. One of the things that I think Justice Sotomayor said is, only a minority of, maybe, again, quote me not, but a minority of, medical professionals, think that babies can feel pain that early. Well, the majority of medical professionals are not experts in fetal pain. So it really doesn't matter what the majority of medical professionals are saying, because the experts in fetal pain agree, starting at as early as, 14 weeks, these babies can feel pain.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that it's something that, again, it's a travesty that, the general public is so poorly educated on fetal development in general.
That's unbelievable. Yeah, you're right. They actually aren't experts in fetal pain, so they should just shut up. Okay. What about this issue? So you brought it up when you're talking about the development of the cerebral cortex. Sometimes I hear on campuses, and I hear varying things as to when human life should be valued. Pro-lifers say, duh, at conception, when something goes from nothing to existence. Sometimes people will say heartbeat, but then when they find out how soon the heart begins to beat, they walk it back, because then they realize they agree with me that, pretty much every abortion should be banned. So they're like, oh no, too much like you. But then we'll hear these arguments about the brain, of when the cortex is fully developed, or sometimes I hear when the child is, cognate of their aware, they're aware of their surroundings and that they themselves are an independent person. Can you talk us through how the human brain in this preborn child develops, and what some of those milestones are, and maybe why making that argument is kind of, one, a slippery slope, but two, not a good argument for why to justify abortions?
Sure. One of the best kind of arguments I've heard in defense of, again, the preborn child before, consciousness as perhaps you and I know it, awareness as you and I know it, comes in the form of, when we look at patients going under a surgical procedure, being under general anesthesia, certainly that person at that point is not conscious of their surroundings at all. Can they feel pain? No, they can't feel pain. Could you snuff them out and they wouldn't know it? Absolutely. Again, they they place the trust of their life in our hands, knowing that, again, their life could end in that, kind of a situation and, without their awareness. But nobody would argue that that would be a moral or ethical situation, again, for us to take the life of someone, even if they weren't aware of it, they couldn't feel it, it wouldn't cause them pain or distress. But, we all know that, is a morally bankrupt argument. And the preborn child is no different. Again, normal human development, starts in the womb and continues outside of the womb. A child at 10 weeks is perfectly appropriate for their stage of development. And again, even as early as, 10 weeks is responding to their environment. So again, I think it's a bit of a morally bankrupt argument to say, well, they wouldn't know if you snuffed out their life, because again, just because you're sleeping or anesthetized, it doesn't mean I can take your life just because you're not aware of it.
Yeah. What about the viability argument? What's interesting is, what was so significant about this Dobbs case was this is the first time the Supreme Court agreed to hear a case surrounding an abortion ban that was a pre-viability ban. Right now in the United States, the viability is at 24 weeks, I think is considered 24 weeks. What is viability, and does it matter? Does it ever move? Because I would think with technology, that line of viability will continue to, be moved back even further.
Yep, that's exactly right. As a neonatologist, every time I hear that viability argument, it makes something inside of me, want to say something, right? I mean, you look at viability over the last 20 years, and absolutely we're slowly marching, further and further down the timeline to now there has been, babies who have survived even as early as 21 weeks. Certainly, that is a risky situation. That's a high risk situation. The baby would need, full medical support if that's what the family, decided, because there is some questions, ethically, as far as, how aggressively should we be resuscitating, again, babies, in certain categories. But yeah, certainly viability is a shifting goalpost to the point where, at 32 weeks, we're talking 20 years ago, the survival, was what it was at that point. And now again, we're, down to 21 weeks, it's incredible. Back when, JFK's child needed to be ventilated, and ventilators weren't readily available, that child passed, and he was born in the 30 weeks or thereabouts, 30 to 35, I can't remember exactly. But again, you can see how far we've come. And so viability really is dependent upon our medical technology, our ability to, resuscitate, in the delivery room, and, the capabilities of every hospital varies. For example, the state where I work, and nationwide, at 25 weeks, it's universally recommended to provide full resuscitation at that point, because again, the survival is so good, up to 90% of those babies will survive. And again, with a pretty good outcome as far as survival without impairment goes. Certainly between 21 to 23 weeks, that is a bit of a gray zone. Certainly we, don't want to prolong suffering. Palliative care is certainly an option for those babies. But again, there have been parents who have chosen full resuscitation, again, even for a 21-week baby that has survived, again, with pretty good outcome. So, certainly the viability line is one that is actively shifting even since I have been practicing. So again, it's really, nothing intrinsic about the viability other than really our medical technology and our capabilities to resuscitate those babies.
I think you may brought up an important point of I remember one time, I think it was Live Action, and a couple other groups started reporting on it. There was a story of a woman, she posted it, and I think Live Action found it, where she had given birth to a severely premature child, I think 21 or 22 weeks. I think it was in Cleveland area. And they refused to resuscitate her child. Openly refused. They killed her child. And it was, I just remember reading the story of thinking how helpless this woman must have been to just have given birth, being in the panic about your child, and then the hospital refusing to help. When your child did have a chance, not saying 100% chance, but your child did have a chance in the hospital. I hope she sued that hospital for everything that they were worth. The pain that they've inflicted in killing her. There's nothing, no lawsuit would have ever recouped the cost of losing a child. But it was somebody had to be held responsible for that decision. I mean, it was, I don't know if you remember that, but that was, I still think about that a lot when we say this word viability, because it leaves these children who are born at 21, 22 weeks who could be resuscitated. What's the standard in the hospitals? Does it just depend on who is the neonatologist on call when you give birth?
So different hospitals will have, different parameters and protocols. Certainly some will set the mark at 22 weeks and say we're not able to provide resuscitation before 22 weeks. But again, depending on the hospital and the capabilities, certainly that's, a situation where, and we also know dates are off plus or minus a week, especially in the case where a mom isn't sure of her dates, the date may be off a little bit. It's definitely appropriate to at least assess the baby and kind of, take a look and see if there's anything that we think would be appropriate to do for that child. And again, that's the trickiness of dating pregnancies. Again, it's not an exact science in so often so many of the cases, unless we have an in vitro situation or something like that. But certainly if a mom is at all questionable on her dates, and, the baby comes out kicking and screaming, it does make sense if she says, please do something, to do something. It's again, especially if there's a question and, the baby may be a little farther along, than we thought. So, it is a case-by-case basis. Certainly we do need to work within the protocols and, regulations of a certain hospital system that we're in. But again, that being said, every child is a little bit different. If you have something that's billed a 22-weeker and they look a little more like a 23-weeker and active and moving and trying to breathe, absolutely, I think it's reasonable to offer resuscitation to that family, especially the family that's, begging for, a chance. Again, like I said, we want to be really careful not to just prolong suffering. But again, for a baby who looks like they have a shot, definitely there should be support for those children. Absolutely.
Do you think if more people who are pro-abortion were required to see these premature children, or even the ultrasounds of these children in the womb, do you think it would change their minds? Do you think it would change the conversation about abortion in America? Yes, absolutely. And we have good research that has answered that question, with an exclamation point. It's upwards of almost, 85 to 90% of women who are accurately shown an ultrasound image of their child. Again, not showing, the corner pocket of fluid and saying, look, there's nothing, but actually showing the child, describing the child. Absolutely, upwards of almost 90% of those women will choose life for their child. So a lot of, abortion requires kind of women to remain in the dark regarding fetal development, regarding fetal pain, because once you educate women, they do choose life. Again, we are the pro-life side, we're the pro-science side, we're the pro-information side. We want women to know, what their children look like, and they make the decision from there. Again, 90% of them, again, will choose life. So absolutely, it's a game changer when we simply provide these women with honest, accurate information about the development of their child. We don't even need to kind of argue it from there. Again, they'll make the choice, they'll make the choice for life. Yeah. I mean, it's very simple. I guess to kind of, before we end this conversation, and you're such a wealth of information, so I have so many things I could ask you, but I wanted to talk about adverse prenatal diagnosis and how that affects, your work as a neonatologist, and the families that you're working with. Do you ever? I mean, I assume you're working with families who have children who have some pretty complex medical issues.
Yes, definitely. I think one of the, the sad truths about the pro-choice movement is a lot of women who are given an adverse fetal diagnosis are not really given a choice. We hear time and time again, they're just signed up for the abortion. Okay, well, we scheduled your abortion for such and such a date. Never being even offered the option to, again, continue pregnancy. That's obviously not pro-choice. That's the doctor's choice in that situation. Certainly, we need to educate these parents about the prognosis for their children that, are given a life-limiting diagnosis. Again, we really focus on language. So, it's important to call it what it is. It's a life-limiting diagnosis. Again, it's something that we expect may shorten the child's life expectancy. But with many of these cases, it's a gray zone. We don't know exactly how long the child has. And many children, in fact, will kind of surprise us and last a lot longer than what we may have thought. And again, with a much better quality of life than what we may have thought. There have been a lot of studies of parents who have chosen life for their children with these life-limiting diagnoses, conditions, whether that be a genetic anomaly, some kind of a major organ system, issue. But again, many of these families will say, I was given this dismal prognosis, and, my child is happy, and my child, loves life, loves to live. Again, of course, that, might look a little different, from child to child. But, we're, as physicians, we're notoriously bad for predicting quality of life. So, in the case of a child who is accurately diagnosed with a life-limiting condition in the womb, we need to be full disclosure with the family, kind of tell them what we know, but kind of walk through them, again, to say you do have the choice to pursue palliative care for your child. Make sure the family gets enrolled in, a really great program. There's a lot of great palliative care programs around the country. And what palliative care, especially in the neonatal period, looks like is, comfort care alongside of curative care where it is indicated. So again, children who have diagnoses such as trisomy, 21, 18, 13, all of those, again, some of them really surprise us. Some of them last and live, a life that is worth living, and those children should be fully supported. At the time of their delivery, especially, again, if that's what the family wants to pursue. So again, I think we're really pro-informed decisions. We want families to know that no, abortion is not the only option that you have. And we've also looked at literature that has shown us that, families who choose life, again, for their children with life-limiting conditions, are really grateful for that experience, take, something away from that, even, of course, it's the hardest, decision you'll ever make to hold your child, allow your child to pass in your arms. Again, it's hard to say with some of these children how long they'll last, but a lot of parents will say how thankful they were for that experience, how thankful they were to be supported. And I have, been blessed to see that firsthand. Again, that is an emotional experience. That is a very difficult experience. But you see it, even in the families' faces, many of them are so thankful to have met their child alive and have been able to say goodbye to their child and hold their child as they pass. Depending on the situations, again, palliative care really aims for, dignified passing, pain-free passing. We can, provide oxygen when indicated, medications to alleviate suffering. But it's a way of allowing that child to be dignified and, again, supported through whatever may come.
Treated like a human being, not inconvenience.
Absolutely.
Have you ever met a family that's chosen this route instead of choosing the abortion that's regretted it?
So I have met some women who have chosen life for, again, a child with a very severe life-limiting condition. A few that come to mind are we had a family whose child had bilateral renal agenesis. So again, no kidneys. And in those cases, the lung does not develop. The baby will not survive for very long. But again, in this family's case, they opted for a C-section a little bit early. They were able to hold their baby. Again, he was with them for a little while. They were able to dress the baby, say their goodbyes, have the family meet him. It was heart-wrenching. Of course, that's, nobody's going to sugarcoat that. That was, an absolutely, painful experience for that family. But again, they were so thankful for what we were able to do for them, for providing, again, their son with a dignified passing, and that they were really supported through that process. I mean, we had, chaplain there, family there, nursing there, again, just kind of everyone, just embracing that family in a big hug. And again, just supporting them so strongly. And again, they were just so thankful for the experience, as hard as that was, as tragic as the situation was. Again, they were so thankful in the end that they were able to meet their son. We had a mother that, I dealt with personally who chose life for her child with trisomy 18. And that baby, again, surprised us all, lasted a little spitfire, a little sweetheart girl. Ended up needing some cardiac surgery and things like that. But, again, these are human beings without question. I mean, they're beautiful little human beings. And that mother, was so thankful that we were able to support her child and provide the necessary medical care.
Yeah. Have you ever met a physician who refused to treat some of these children, that just thinks that they're better off dead and refused to provide care?
So, again, even within the physician community, we have obviously pro-choice physicians, pro-life physicians. So certainly, depending on, where you're coming from, you see these children differently. Again, we're not here to pass judgment or shame or blame on women who have, made another decision. Again, these are tragic circumstances. But, the goal, I think, from my perspective, is really to offer these women choices, which, includes pursuing perinatal palliative care for their children. And again, the literature also supports when these women are actually presented this route as an option, many will choose this option and, again, report how grateful they are for it. So again, it's not something that we should be withholding from these women. We shouldn't be signing them up for the abortion. Again, that's us making the choice for them, not them. But, every woman should feel fully supported in her decision to carry her child. And again, to have that child be supported, however, is medically, responsible.
Is abortion a cure for some of these life-limiting diagnoses?
So abortion cures nothing. I'm sure you've heard it said before, but, pregnancy is not a disease and abortion is not a cure. This is, it's interesting. There have been studies also that have looked at, physicians who are, dealing with a pregnant mom who has a baby with a life-limiting condition. And the surveys have shown that, physicians think that, the healing, kind of easy way to deal with the situation is abortion, as opposed to lots of nurses who are actually there, when the baby either is delivered or aborted, have a different perspective. They see that mom grieve, whichever route is chosen, but they've seen that, having a mom choose life for her child and pursue the palliative care route is actually more of a healing, way to do things. Right. So it's interesting, I think as physicians, we want to fix things. We want to, make things better, right away. But again, abortion fixes nothing. And we know it does leave women with a lot of scars and wounds that are very difficult to heal from. So really offering palliative care as a viable option is something that we can do to really support these women and to give them true choices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's just so important. I'm reminded of my good friend Mary Kellett, who founded Prenatal Partners for Life. It's prenatalpartners.forlife.org. I love their organization because her son Peter was born with trisomy 18 and had a cleft palate, and the hospital just didn't want to fix his cleft palate, so he couldn't eat. I mean, she had to fight with everything she had to keep Peter alive, and he lived for, I think he was 8 years old when he passed. And led this completely full happy life, surrounded by a family who just absolutely adored him. And that's why she started Prenatal Partners for Life, because other people, young moms who had no idea what trisomy 18 was, and being told we're not going to fix the cleft palate, so your child is going to die anyway. Why would I'm like, well, you're not going to starve the child, let the child eat, and so it's unbelievable, the stories that she has on the website of families who've experienced the adverse diagnosis, a life-limiting disease, your son or daughter's going to be born with XYZ, who have chosen life, these children, some of them, have survived into adulthood, some have survived into teen years, some lived mere hours or days, but there's no stories on her website. And she has tons of stories, like hundreds of stories, but there's no stories of regret of ever choosing life. I guess one last question, but anyway, that's a great resource for anyone listening, tuning in, who has a friend who experiences this life-limiting diagnosis when they're pregnant. Prenatalpartnersforlife.org. Totally recommend their wonderful ministry. One last question is more of a personal question for you. How do you, as a physician, deal with these situations where you've got to go in and deliver some heartbreaking news to families?
I see my role as a physician really to facilitate families, in, having as much quality time as with their children as possible. Nobody wants to be the bearer of bad news. That's difficult in any context. But I think especially when it comes to medicine, it's our job to be very honest with families, to not sugarcoat it, but also not to take away hope. That's another theme that runs really deep in the palliative care literature. Families want to be given hope, again, not unrealistic hope, but again, to be given appropriate hope. Again, the hope for different situations looks different. Again, for, the family that I talked about whose child was born without kidneys, the hope we gave that family was to meet their child alive, again, which we were able to accomplish through, early delivery with the C-section. So again, families, need to be given hope. They need to be given accurate information. And, I think in those ways, as difficult of a situation as it is, I feel that I really am helping these families. Again, it's tough. It's not easy. But, to walk alongside a family in an honest manner, in a, realistic manner, but in a hopeful manner, in a supportive manner, is really what, these families need. And, there aren't enough medical professionals out there, quite frankly, who are capable, able, and willing to do all those things. Again, the literature also shows that a lot of, the discomfort that comes along with a diagnosis of a life-limiting condition really is the physician's own discomfort with delivering a child who has whatever condition it may be. And in that way, we are really there to, set ourselves and, our issues and our emotional concerns, that needs to be parked at the door. We need to be there for these women, again, to support them every single step of the way.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I do think it, I've spoken with medical students, and I think there's this uncomfortability with death and suffering. And so it's, to them, it's almost an easier solution to kind of pass the buck, to say, just go have an abortion. Just go get it taken care of. You can always get pregnant again, which, by the way, there's no guarantee, and there's no do-over of children, right? You will still be the mother of a child. And so I do think there's this uncomfortability that some of the physicians, especially the younger physicians, have with death and suffering. And it's something, it's a theme that's coming up right now, for example, when we're talking about the Dobbs decision, and, Judge Amy Coney Barrett brought up adoption and the oral arguments that you and I listened to. And now the attack is on adoption across the country. It's there's this memo that was sent out, and all the, Huffington Post, New York Times, Vogue, Vox, they're all talking about, and it's all adoption is suffering, and adoption's bad because people might suffer, and birth mothers might suffer, children may suffer, and therefore it's bad. And yeah, abortion is this quick, easy solution, and no one ever suffers. And that is the best solution for all of us, because abortion equals no suffering, which we know is categorically false. If you've met anyone who's had an abortion, you'll know there is immense suffering that goes into the decision to abort. Whether or not a woman ever fully expresses regret, there is suffering that goes on there, and on years beyond. But it's we have to get rid of anyone or anything that could potentially suffer. And it's are you advocating for getting rid of all of us then? Because that's part of being human, is that all of us will suffer. So I want to thank you so much, Dr. Kolb, for what you're doing there at your hospital and your advocacy across the country. It's so great to talk with somebody who's such a dedicated advocate for life, and you're not only are you doing that, your advocacy against abortion, educating people about fetal development, but you're doing it literally every day. You're saving babies' lives. So that's pretty epic. So thank you so much for coming on. Where can folks find out more about your work and your advocacy work?
So again, I do have some work with Live Action, some of their response videos you can see there. That's probably, I don't have a website.
You mean you're not busy keeping up your website and tweeting while you're practicing medicine all day?
Yeah, so I'll have to work on that. But at this point, no official way to contact.
Unless you want to go to your hospital and receive
right
care.
There you go.
So thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you, Dr. Kolb, for all that you're doing. Make sure you like, share, and do your thing with this episode. Follow and promote this episode on your own social media channels. We've got to get word out that there is hope for these life-limiting diagnosis situations. And we also need to spread the word about like field development, because apparently our own Supreme Court justices are illiterate when it comes to biology. So thanks, guys.